Hello, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. So today we're gonna continue with chapter 4, volume number 2. The still in topic Southeast Asia security upheaval. But now we're gonna focus on the conflict that happened throughout the in the formation of ASEAN. So we're gonna see that is it ASEAN really doing its job to keep and maintain peace and peace building in Southeast Asia, or just it just uh, words that can't describe anything in terms of ASEAN itself. Okay, and regardless of ASEAN, so the main pillar of ASEAN has first is to promote peace in Southeast Asia, and then to generate an economic factor lah throughout the member itself. Okay, throughout this slide, so we're gonna look at the introduction first, so we can see that maybe we focus on Cambodia first, and then we're gonna look at the nature of the Cambodia conflict that happened between Cambodia and Vietnam, and then we're gonna see how ASEAN view on the conflict itself and the role of ASEAN in settle these issues, and summary as well as conclusion. Okay, this is the map of East Asia. So you can see that Vietnam and Cambodia shares border, as well as Thailand and Laos shares border with Cambodia itself, and Vietnam is very near and share border with China, as well as Laos and Cambodia. Okay, so this is the timeline. Okay, we look at timeline in Cambodia from 1941 until the end of the Cold War. Okay, starting from 70s, Prince Sihanouk, okay, so take rule in the administrations of Cambodia. The major enemy is communist, okay, anti-royalist and also non-communist. And then Lon Nol, okay, taking in charge 75, 5 years. During that period, US had an operation in Vietnam. And then soon to be, Cambodia is also part allied for the US government that period. So with Cambodia and also Saigon, uh, US tried to occupy Ho Chi Minh and win the war against communism. Okay, and after the end of Cold War, end of the Vietnam War, okay, 1975, and then Lon Nol regime being brought down by Pol Pot, and then Pol Pot is Maoist, he is communist, and in line with the China Communist Party, but yet he is anti-Vietnamese. Okay, although Vietnam is communist, but yet he is anti-Vietnamese. Okay, Vietnamese communist also royalist to Republican. And this issue happens when Cameroon the one to uh, collaborate with Vietnam in terms of to expand the Communist Party in South Asia, and that actually bring the polemic lah into the first period, and then it happened, and Vietnam managed to invade Cambodia. The reasons of Vietnam invade Cambodia at the first place, they say is that they wanted to escalate the Cameroon regime, because they feel that Cameroon regime is too dangerous, and then a lot of massacre happens in Cambodia, And then this is the reason why, at the first place, Vietnam invaded Cambodia. Okay, and then after the fall of regime Khmer Rouge, Heng Samrin or Han Sen being elected as the Prime Minister of Cambodia, and he is very pro-communist, focusing on he are allied with Vietnam, and then his major enemy is Khmer Rouge lah, and DK Communist Party. Okay, this is an introduction why uh, Asean at first place. Okay, Asean involvement in the Cambodia conflict is interesting, not examine to extent to which its mechanism had been useful or inadequate in the search of the political settlement in the conflict. So we a lot of various initiatives that ASEAN member undertook during the durations. So how ASEAN managed to to settle uh, the conflict between Cambodia and Vietnam at the time were not yet a part of ASEAN. Okay, so on this period, Cambodia also is not part of ASEAN, and same as Vietnam, because during the Cold War, most of ASEAN state, they are scared of Vietnam itself. You know, because when Vietnam being fall by the Communist Party, by the Communist ideology, so most of the ASEAN thinks that Vietnam is the turning point, the separations of communist influence or ideology in ASEAN. So they might scared that the communist ideology might come over and occupy most of the ASEAN state. Okay, same also as Malaysia. We also feel that when at the first place Vietnam fall to Communist Party, and then on 80s, 1980s to Nusin on initiate a mass development in our defense, you know, to protect our security on that period. Okay, Cambodia gained independence from France independence in 1954, and then coalition government and Democratic Party, Democratic Cambodia. Okay, and then Khmer Rouge led by Pol Pot. Okay, he's a royalist force of a fund CPAC led by the Prince Sihanouk. So Khmer people is a national liberation fund. Okay, led by Sun San. Okay, this is the party lah. Okay, that lead by the Khmer. Okay, and one of the biggest date that between Cambodia and Vietnam is 1991, when they have both have an agreement, which is called in Paris Peace Occurred. In Paris, they signed the agreement to release Cambodia back, and also the withdrawal of Vietnam army in Cambodia. Okay, this is post-Civil War. Okay, starting from 1991, 1992, and 1991 got Peace Paris occurred, that actually start the the resolution between Vietnam and Cambodia, and then UN Transitional Authority Cambodia being organized and led by Akashi. And then on 1993, PM Han Sen, become the head of government, and then head of state is King Sihanouk. And then on this period, they already get their state back from Vietnam. Vietnam already withdraw everything. And 1987 present until now, Hun Sen become his prime minister, and then King Shamini, okay, is the head of state. Okay, nature of Cambodia conflict. In brief, Vietnam invade Cambodia in December 1978. So it's occupied in its capital, Phnom Penh, in 1979. So Cambodia government was headed by Pol Pot, was ousted and replaced by Vietnam with a puppet government, which is Heng Samrin. So the impact on ASEAN at this point, first ASEAN dashed the dream of founding fathers, having one Southeast Asia. When Vietnam invade, so we feel that Vietnam wanted to expand their influence or imperialism in Southeast Asia after they win their war with US. So it actually, at the first place, dashes the dream of five founding fathers of ASEAN that wanted to initiate ASEAN for the Southeast Asia country state. And Vietnam invasion was a violation of ASEAN norm of peaceful and coexistence of non-use of force. So this actually being worried by the Southeast Asian, most of the Southeast Asian state. And then it also threatened the security of Thailand, because Thailand shares common border with Cambodia. And this is the factor for the conflict. Okay, four factor that has been come out. The first, Vietnam need to overcome why actually Vietnam invade Cambodia. Okay, this is the four reason. The first is Vietnam says that they need to overcome the rice shortage, because they're unable to grow rice for because of the population is very high, increasing, and then the, the Cambodia own land, as well as a good water system, which is the Mekong Delta, and then had filtered land and so much of land to cultivate. Okay, so because of this reason, Vietnam invade Cambodia. Okay, the second reason is the French colonial policy. On 1863, Cambodia became a French protector. So Union of Indochina is along with the Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. This is because French are their colonial, so they wanted to build one union that actually can combine these three both, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, because they wanted to support French uh, using this union. So French actually supported the Vietnam settlement in Cambodia, because they feel that on this period, Vietnam and Laos agreed to form a union, but Cambodia reluctant to become a part of Indo-Chinese Union. So that's why, uh, with no in a good resolution, or they don't find any good solution, so Vietnam invade Cambodia. Okay, the third is the territorial dispute. Okay, issues and territorial dispute also reflected most of the ASEAN state, okay, including Cambodia, Vietnam. 1869 and 1942, French added large areas of Cambodia territory to international conflict. And after the French rule ended, so this area would not return to the Cambodia but remain in Vietnam. As a result, numerous conflicts have occurred between Vietnam and Cambodia since 1954. So this is one of the reasons why Vietnam feel that they are right invade Cambodia. And then the last, Vietnam wanted to forge a special relation with Laos and also Cambodia. Okay, the plan was to establish a communist federation. Vietnam unable to realize the plan. 1977, Vietnam and Laos signed the Treaty of Friendship and also Cooperation. Then Cambodia under Pol Pot were reelected, and then they reject the special relationship concept. And on 1998, Vietnam invade Cambodia. Okay, this is the reason why actually Vietnam invade Cambodia. Okay, the Cambodia conflict saw the involvement of the biggest state, the superpower. Okay, the involvement of China and also the Soviet Union. So China remained source of aid to Vietnam during the Vietnam War. So through China supported Vietnam, but China did not want Vietnam to control all of Indochina. So China backed Cambodia. Okay. So it is like same like issues in Afghanistan, Afghanistan and American. Okay, before Cold War, Afghanistan being held by the Soviet. Uh, but by Afghanistan being held by the American, and then when the end of Cold War, American try to invade Afghanistan. Okay, and it also happened in ASEAN. Okay, for example, this issue Cambodia and also Vietnam, and the same thing when during the Vietnam War, China helped Vietnam because of Communist Party, but after the end of Vietnam War, and China feel that Vietnam is too greedy, wanted to expand their control in Indochina, and then on the same reason, Cameroon is really uh, what do we see that Cameroon is uh, one of the leaders that actually tendons to the China itself. Okay, because they also adopt the more Zedong communist system in Cambodia. Sorry, sorry semua sikit. And then on this period, China were back Cambodia, and they feel that Vietnam is not right, and that while invaded Cambodia. Okay, also border conflict happened between China and Vietnam in 1977 and 1979. So thus, this made Vietnam to establish a close bond with the Soviet Union. Okay, let's see how ASEAN view the Cambodia issues. Okay, the first, ASEAN rejected Vietnam's occupations, okay, on Cambodia. Heng Samrin government was illegitimate and illegally. ASEAN also feel that Vietnam had violated Cambodia sovereignty and self-determination. ASEAN drafted the solution on the Cambodia conflict in the UN Security Council and was adopted by the UN General Assembly 1979. Then the call of Vietnam withdrawal lah. So ASEAN call and also UN become a constant issues in several ASEAN meeting. So every ASEAN meeting, so the main agenda is to settle this Cambodia issue by asking Vietnam to withdraw from Cambodia. So ASEAN give primary considerations to the security of Thailand because Thailand shares border with Cambodia. And then overall, ASEAN view the occupations of the Cambodia by Soviet Union backed Vietnam will only strengthen Soviet Union foothold in the region, because on this period we are having Cold War, and then Soviet Union also need allied in Southeast Asia, because on this period Philippines as well okay, Philippines and most of the ASEAN were tendons to British and also allied American. Okay, ASEAN political response to ASEAN Vietnam occupation is uncompromising and issue statement during special foreign minister meetings in Bangkok 1979. In several joint statements, also ASEAN demand immediate withdrawal of Vietnam troops an ASEAN and draft resolution on Cambodia in the UN Security Council 1979. And then ASEAN also sponsored UN General Assembly 1980 resolution on Cambodia calling for an international conference on Kampuchea. 1990 ICK, which led to 97 in favors and 129 against. Okay, this is international issues. So ASEAN consensus is limited as a regional body in resolving a conflict. And we will see that ASEAN could only take up its cause in the international area and also employ collective diplomacy. And 1979 until 1989, 10 years, ASEAN had been generally successful in effective in mobilizing sustained support from the international community. So ICK call on various solutions, okay, and then ASEAN lobbied for diplomatic support to use economic sanction against Vietnam. Okay, now we're gonna look at ASEAN dealing with different threat perception. Every state has their own threat perception. Okay, so we're gonna look what actually Thailand fears. Malaysia, Singapore as well. So while the occupation, regardless as threatening to the peace and also stability in South Asia, so each member had its own different perceptions of the kind of threat posed by the Cambodian problem. Okay, the first state would be the Thailand, because Thailand is very near to Cambodia. It was primarily the geopolitical dimensions of the threat, and Thailand shares common border with Cambodia, and hundreds of refugees from Cambodia settled along the Thailand border. And then for the Philippines, geography is very separated and also not confronted, but Philippines still says that the invasions are the violations of international norms. It also violates of zone of peace, freedom, and neutrality because we don't want any influence, in Southeast Asia, and we don't want any state that trying to violate the international norms. Singapore and Brunei share the same inclination, consider themselves vulnerable against foreign invasion and also aggressions. Malaysia and Indonesia, tough Malaysia shares a land border with Thailand and hosted thousands of refugees. Malaysia saw involvement of major power as a threat, for example, China and Soviet Union. Okay, it also rivalry for the two communities could extend to the region. For Malaysia, Cambodia conflict was also a major power confrontation. Okay, accommodating Vietnam. So Vietnam consistently insists that its occupation of Cambodia was to liberate Cambodia from the oppressions of cruel purport. So this is the reason. This is the explanation of Vietnam. Vietnam says that why they invade. Okay, the first, because they wanted to put the end to Pol Pot cruel regime. And then Vietnam insists that Cambodia was the one who started the border war. He said that the reason was Cambodia started, then they finish it lah. And then Cambodia policy to put three in the Chinese against each other. Okay. And then Vietnam is also try to accommodate ASEAN. So on 1980, Vietnam proposed demilitarized zone. Okay, Thailand Cambodia border area, DMZ. Okay, DMZ is being used into the conflict state. For example, Korea and also North Korea, India and Pakistan. The borders being justified as DMZ are demilitarized zones. Okay, and 1982, Vietnam announced a partial withdrawal of Vietnam force as a token of good faith, and also recognize the role of the UN role in the settlement of the conflict. ASEAN realized that a more accommodating stand was still better option in order to pay way for solution. Okay, this is peace Paris occurred. This is the reason, the main ultimate lah for the end of the conflict between Cambodia and Vietnam. So, in spite of all the effort being made by ASEAN, so the shift occurred between deliberations in the United Nations began in 1990s. So, UN, five power members decided that instead of deferring the ASEAN leadership, the UN was a more convenient and also appropriate role for seeking a comprehensive solution. As after a series of consultations among five power, an agreement on a comprehensive political settlement of the Cambodia conflict was signed on to 23rd October 1991. So give UN a mandate to bring about settlement, and then Cambodia was only ultimately placed under the United Nations Transition Authority, Cambodia UNTAC. So because they wanted to form a government, and then they need to go for administration all, so the UN give some aid in terms of the formations in the formations itself. Okay, the conclusion, what we can learn from this conflict: ASEAN did not resolve the Cambodia conflict. It shows. So how should we then define ASEAN role in conflict? So ASEAN took a lead in the search of a comprehensive political settlement from the start and end. ASEAN was never prepared to manage nor resolve a conflict of the nature, and then ASEAN at the best made its option heard in the international arena as actively, aggressively possible. Okay, and the significance of ASEAN in Cambodia conflict. The first is ASEAN sent message to Vietnam that ASEAN would not tolerate issue its use of force in international relations. Okay, force the international community to take up Cambodia conflict and sustain the interest for as long as it could. So it reassured Thailand that its counterpart in the grouping were not only sympathetic to its security, but also were mere than willing to extend help. So it gave the group a focus of on its respective external relations. So ASEAN major was a mediator, reflected the skillful conflict manager in the region, and identity of community building in ASEAN. So Cambodia conflict provided a point of reference as to where and what ASEAN stood for. So it also defined their identity as a regional organization constituted by its norms and diplomatic practice. Okay, so that's all for this chapter, and apologize from me because got some what along while I'm presenting, got some obstacle regardless on my health issue. Okay, sorry. Yeah. And next week we're going to continue for the next topic, which gonna be the ASEAN organization. We're gonna look at what actually ASEAN itself brought up, and 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 then we follow to the next uh, syllabus. Next presentation will be the organizations and also the future of ASEAN. Okay, so that's all from now. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum and stay safe.